Silent Separation, Chapter 6.1 Separation. The door was not locked as Mosheng pushed it open. It was a double room. There was an empty bed, and Yichen's bed was near the window. The sound of the opening of the door did not wake him up. He was hooked to an ivy and still sleeping. Her heart seemed to be entangled by an invincible string. Step by step, she approached him, and that string little by little tightened. He lay on the bed. His face looked peeled and thin. While sleeping, he even had a frown. After meeting him again, she had not actually taken a good look at his appearance, and now she finally could. Her fingers unconsciously touched his wrinkled brows and then brushed across his eyelash. She could imagine if the owner was awake, these pairs of eyes would certainly be cold and detached, and sometimes slightly mocking. Finally, her fingers stopped at the slightly peeled lips. It was said that most of the people with this kind of lips are fickle in love. Yichen, Yichen, why aren't you like that? Don't you understand that we could never return to the past? 7 years. Everything has changed. Before she realized what she was doing, her lips replaced her fingers. Her lips still cold from the outside air, but his lips were unexpectedly warm. The warmness unexpectedly made her sad. Then her tears without reason dropped one by one, and she could not control them, until her wrist was harshly grabbed by someone. Yichen. Has he awakened up? Mosheng's mind immediately became blanked. Her eyes were blurred by the tears, so she couldn't see his face properly, but she could still hear his angry voice. What do you actually want? Yichen asked with his grim teeth. Zhao Mosheng, what do you actually want? She gasped and was tongue-tied. All her thoughts flew away from her brain. For some time, she did not know what else to do and could only look at his fuzzy appearance. She felt the strength that was grasping her wrist was getting stronger, as if anxious to crush her wrist. Only then would he be satisfied. She tried to control her tears, but they were beyond her control. Instead, more tears dropped more rapidly. How could it be like this? She could clearly hear the things that she once held dear in her heart were in the process of being shattered. This kind of shattering sound made her feel afraid and panic. Yichen's aggressive voice made her scared. She did not know what she was doing. Didn't she want to completely cut off the past, including her connection with him? Then what was she doing just a moment ago? She was totally confused. Escape. When this idea came out, it immediately dictated her action. She did not know where she produced so much strength to unexpectedly break free of his grasp and run towards the door. Yichen said in a stern voice, Zhao Mosheng, you dare to go? Damn it. Yichen looked at her holding open the door, so he abruptly pulled out the introversion's infusion dripped in his left hand and got out of the bed to stop her. However, he was still sick, had been resting on the bed for far too long, and his footsteps were far too anxious. Hence, he stumbled and fell down awkwardly at the bedside. All these, Mosheng naturally did not know. She blankly followed a group of people into the elevator. The people in the elevator glanced at her, but they were accustomed to seeing this, so they lowered their heads, absorbed in their own thoughts. This hospital is used to witnessing life and death incidents on a daily basis, so 1 or 2 people with cheeks streaming with tears on their face are very, very common. After getting out of the elevator, the noisy sound in the lounge all of a sudden filled her ears. In the midst of the people coming and going, Mosheng suddenly did not know where to go. Where could she go? Didn't she already knew? Although the world is big, there was not a single place that didn't have Yichen. Loi He? Mingtian was surprised to see the man appear at the door. Loi He, aren't you supposed to be at the hospital? I was discharged this morning. Mingtian, take the information on the Anna's company case to my office later. Yichen said that while walking. Were there any important message in these few days? Yes, Mingtian immediately flipped through her notes to report a few important messages, then hesitated for a moment and replied, Loi He, a female reporter for Susie, called several times and said that she wanted to do an interview with you. She also personally came to the office once. She said that she is your alumna. Do you want to return her calls? When Yichen heard Susie being mentioned, his eye flashed slightly and then stayed calm again. No, if she calls again, just reach out her directly. Okay, Minton nodded her head. Finally, she felt that the lawyer who deals with matters efficiently and never sloppy, has returned. After Xinghe came back from the prosecutor's office, he directly went into Yichen's office and saw him engrossed in his work. He simply did not know what to say. I did not believe what Mintin told me, so can you explain what's going on? What's going on? Yichen looked up at him from the file he was reviewing. His face was still a little peeled, but his eyes were clear and lively. Don't act dumb with me. I remember you're only allowed to be discharged from the hospital the day after tomorrow. May I ask you why you're here now? I have left the hospital early. Xinghe stroked his head. Although he is a lawyer, he had to admit it is difficult to speak with another lawyer, as replying like this was the same as not replying. Don't you want to live anymore? The law firm will not collapse without you. That may not necessarily be true. Yichen flipped through the documents in his hand. I remember, Lao Yun, you are not good in this aspect. Xinghe snorted. No matter how bad we may be, we will also not fail at the negotiating table. Xinghe, Yichen leaned back in his chair and looked at his good friend with somewhat helplessly. I will not treat my health as a joke. Under normal circumstances, you will not. Xinghe looked at him directly and then asked him. She visited? The emotion in Yichen's eyes darkened, and he did not answer, but replied, Did you look for her? Xinghe nodded his head. He looked at Yichen's facial expression in sight. It seems that my action has backfired. No, I wanted to thank you, Yichen said dismissively. If not for her giving me a heavy blow, how could I be completely clear-headed? Xinghe gasped and did not know what else to say. Don't worry, Yichen looked at him with a calm face. Our relationship has completely ended. No, it should be said. My own wishful thinking is completely over now. At 11 o'clock at night, Yichen parked the car. He walked into the elevator with his mind still thinking about the details of the negotiation on the day after tomorrow. Nowadays, he did not seem to be able to come back before 10 o'clock because he had to prepare for several cases on hand at the same time, so he was busy every day until his eyes blurred from the amount of work. Xinghe had given up pursuing him, whereas Lao Yun always cheerfully counted how much the revenue for the quarter were increased by. He laughed happily and said he wanted to prepare the best coffin for Yichen. In fact, Yichen was extremely tired, but he desperately needed to keep himself busy. The elevator arrived at the 12th floor. Yichen walked out of the elevator and took out his keys, ready to open the door. When he saw the person in front of his door, his action froze instantly. She wore a thin sweater, hugging her knees and sitting on his doorstep. Her chin was resting on her knees, and her eyes stared fixedly at the floor. She looked up when she heard the sound of footsteps. She appeared even more haggard than the patient, a little bit thinner, and with a sharper chin. The instant she saw him, her already big eyes seemed flustered, like a person in some kind of difficulty and desperation. Nobody spoke. Yichen stood still for 3 seconds, then moved forward to walk past her. He steadily opened the door. He walked in and turned his hand over to close the door. But there was no sound of the door being closed. Instead, his sleeve was being tightly gripped by her. Yichen? He heard her low and muffled voice, like the whimpering of a little animal, both also pitiful. Do you still want me? Does she know what she was saying? Yichen could only turn around and glared at her fiercely. His expression seemed like he had seen a ghost, although her voice was soft. In such a quiet night, how was it possible that he could not understand? He tried hard to regain his sanity and wanted to pull back his sleeve, but she stubbornly hung on to it. A very familiar shameless gesture. Yichen realized he actually shamefully missed it. Let go. Perhaps his voice was too harsh. Even her hands trembled a little. then slowly, one finger by one finger, she slowly loosened her grip on his sleeve. Yichen could not see her expression because her head was bowed down, but her grievance and sad appearance actually emerged on his mind at this very moment. Every expression fulfilled it in his mind. It was so clear that the next moment he would become soft-hearted. Yichen ignored her and walked straight into the balcony. The cold night air sobered him up a lot. She always had that ability to disturb his life, before in this way and even more so now. Therefore, he had to be more calm, otherwise he was bound to be utterly defeated. He walked back into the living room, but she was still curled up outside the door. "Come in." His voice had recovered its calmness. "What do you want to drink?" "I only have beer and pure water here." He remembered her favorite drinks were colorful ones. Mushan shook her head. Yichen did not insist and sat down on the sofa, like an owner who was entertaining a guest. "Why did you come to look for me?" Mushan did not expect him to act in such a polite and unfamiliar manner, so she somehow did not know what to do. I went to the hospital today. The doctor said that you already left the hospital." "If you come to visit a patient, then you can go back," Yichen interrupted her. Mushan became speechless. Yichen looked at her and said with a slight sarcasm, "If I didn't hear wrongly just now, you seem to want an affair. I am very honored to be chosen by you." And then he paused and did not continue to speak. But Mushan was fully aware of what he was trying to say. Suddenly, her complexion turned pale. She experienced to what extent his word can hurt people. Under such an embarrassment situation, she could only manage to utter, "I do not." "Do not what?" Yichen stared at her with a pressing expression. "Could it be that you do not get married? It was just an excuse for you to resist me." Although he asked with a doubtful tone, he was about 90% certain. His suspicions were justified because he knew she had been living alone all this while, and she'd even went on blind dates. Yichen's heart felt a little pain. If it was indeed an excuse to resist him, at the same time, he also could not help feeling a little joy in the bottom of his heart. However, Mushan did not give him the desired answer. Her ill-at-ease look revealed a faint uneasiness. As such, Yichen could completely understand without her saying out loud. What reason, what calm, all also were thrown to the wind. Instead, anger and embarrassment filled his entire body. Yichen, when are you going to stop acting like a clown with such wishful thinking?" "Okay, tell me, what do you want me to do? Be your secret lover in China or your shameful external marital affair partner?" "Zhao Mosheng, I tell you this, don't even bother to think about it." He had to try hard to control himself to keep his hand from strangling her neck. "No, I and him." Mushan was frightened by his anger, so she stuttered and became inarticulate. The matters between Yinghun and her cannot be explained clearly in a few words. In a moment of desperation, the only thing she could think of was to say, "I've divorced." After saying it, she felt calmer and unconsciously repeated again, "I've divorced." "You have divorced?" Yichen's complexion became even more gloomy and chilly. He angrily laughed. "What makes you think Yichen, would want a divorced woman?" Mushan froze. The expression in her eyes gradually darkened and her shoulders slightly drooped down. Was this not expected? Why did she come on this trip to let her dead heart die again? Just because of those lines in a poem, just because of that photo, she stuck all on one throw. How foolish can she be? But she still wanted him to know. Between me and him, it is not so. Mushan wanted to explain, but in vain. Enough. Yichen could not take it anymore and interrupt her. "You do not need to describe to me the relationship between you and your ex-husband. If you want to get sympathy and comfort, then you've got the wrong guy." Her lips moved, but in the end she did not continue speaking. "Say or do not say, in fact it does not make a difference. Isn't that so? The fact already could not be changed." "I'm going." Mushan stood up, not looking at him, and said in a slight trembling voice, I'm sorry for disturbing you. He did not stop her, as if caught in a confusing maze and not being able to make sense of anything. She opened the door and then heard him say from behind, "Wait." She turned around. Yichen stood up from the sofa and picked up the car keys on the table. "I'll send you back." Mosheng opened her eyes wide in surprise and shook her head. "No need. I can go home by myself." "Indeed you can," Yichen said, mocking. "Then if you're not careful and an accident were to happen, I would be the prime suspect. At that time, we really would be unable to stay clear from each other." "Are all the lawyers' line of thoughts also careful like this?" Mosheng said with difficulty. "I'm sorry to trouble you. This is the last time in this lifetime," Yichen said coldly.